Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Hello everyone from all over the world. Here in Amsterdam it's a sunny day and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we are enjoying here the GreenTech Online, first time an online event, and you are welcome at the Xpert session about artificial light. My name is Frans Dechering. I'm a tech marketing guy and co-founder of Corvus Drones. So technology and horticulture are within my veins. Today we have the topic artificial lighting, and which is an interesting one because it's about managing a plant process. And as my wife told, and she's a good plant physiologist, she says, yeah, there are only two main factors of growing, which are temperature and light, and the rest is less important. I think she will be famous, but let's start with that. So we have the right topic today. So the most important growing factor. We're talking about artificial light, so the traditional light, the Santi lamps, but especially also the LED lights. And I was wondering, so yeah, how innovative is LED? Because the first introduction was already in the 60s, and we are now over 50 years later, and now it's introduced in horticulture. So I'm curious about the presentations and what's going on. And the applications of the artificial light, of course we are talking about tomatoes, but of course other crops. And if you have questions about crops or the technology or the lights or the spectra, etc., please put your questions in the chat room, and then we gather all the questions, and that's the input for the FAQ. Let me introduce the speakers. First we start with Nieves Garcia. Hello Nieves, how are you?
Hello Frans Peter, I'm fine.
Good, thank you. And second, we have Kai. Hello Kai, how are you today?
Good afternoon, Frans Peter. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, and you've got a nice tomato crop as background, thank you. And the last speaker of today is Timo. Hello Timo.
A wonderful good afternoon here from Munich.
Good. So also, so we are all from Europe this time. Yeah. Okay, so that let's go for the presentations. Dear audience, please enjoy and see you after the presentations in the FAQ. And don't forget to put your questions. Thanks.
Thanks everybody for your presence today online here. During the next 10 minutes, I would like to take you through the highlights of the color journey in which the knowledge about light colors in the cultivation of Astromeria has been increased step by step in a cooperation between research, growers, breeders, consultants, and the government. In the Dutch climate conditions, the artificial light is necessary for year-round cultivation of Astromeria because the winter light intensities are limiting. So when this journey started in 2016, typical intensities in commercial greenhouses were approximately 80 micromole per square meter per day, adding about 4 to 5 mole per light per day to the intensity of the sun of 1 to 3 mole per day. But because Astromerias grow better and are more productive with more light, like many other crops, we have witnessed in recent years an increase of the light intensities in greenhouses. And of course, this causes an increase of the electricity demand for the cultivation. And that explains the interest in LED, because LED use less electricity for the same light intensity, and so they allow an increase of the light intensity with a relatively smaller increase of the electricity needed, and they also have a lower heat input compared to HPS lamps. So LED is an essential part of fossil-free cultivation systems because of the lower use of electricity, and LED makes possible to choose the spectrum. If we look at the spectrum of sunlight, we can see that all the lights or the colors of the rainbow are represented in more or less the same amounts. While if we take a high-pressure sodium lamp, the normal artificial lamps used in greenhouses, then we see that some colors are overrepresented and other colors are very little represented. While LED is coming as monochromatic light, and theoretically one can choose the best spectrum to obtain the highest possible yield and to maintain or improve the quality. So it was already in 2016-17 that the first growers started experimenting with LED, and one of the first experiments where we were involved as researchers was this one, where LED in a low intensity of 80 micromole per square meter per second, and with the colors 95% red and 5% blue. This was compared with the HPS reference of the greenhouse and with an hybrid system consisting of HPS lamps completed with LED lamps, a so-called hybrid system. One of the things we learned from this test was that it was very well possible to cultivate with LED astrum areas, and we also learned that the LED system had the highest electricity use efficiency in grams per kilowatt hour. So is the spectrum important? Well, at the low intensities of 80 micromole per square meter per second, it seems not to be so very relevant, but we don't have to forget that at higher intensities, easily 80% of the bar light in the greenhouse is supplied by artificial light in winter, and that between midnight and sunrise, only the lamps supply light. So the quality of the light can be relevant, especially to avoid some deviations of the morphology of the leaves and some undesired overpigmentation or underpigmentation of leaves. So in 2018, a first spectrum test was conducted where 7 spectra were tested in a very small surface of 7 square meters each, with 2 astrum area varieties, and the used spectra are shown in these pictures, and the codes on each picture indicate the color of the light that was used to compose this spectrum. So here is red and blue, red with a high percentage of blue, red with green and blue, red with green, blue, and far red, a white spectrum, a white light spectrum where far red was added, and the 7th spectrum was a double spectrum, a dynamic spectrum where we gave in daytime red and blue light, but at nighttime we gave white light with added far red. The results of this first spectrum test showed that the spectrum definitely influenced the morphology of the flowers and the leaf color, but the spectrum also influenced production and quality. So indeed, the highest production was obtained with the broadest spectrum, with the white with added far red spectrum, but also good results in terms of production were obtained with the dynamic spectrum and the red, green, blue with far red spectrum, which also showed a better leaf quality. So this spectrum, which was one of the best from the seven spectra test, has been already implemented in the research project Astromeria of the Future, which we are conducting now with two varieties, Noise and Virginia, and where we are investigating the feasibility of a fossil-free cultivation concept, and we are having very good results so far, but that's another story for another day. So do we think, or did we think we are already there in terms of choosing the best spectrum for all varieties of Astromeria? Well, not definitely, not really. The impression still existed that maybe there were some varieties, some types of Astromeria that could not be that will not be growing the best in the chosen spectrum for the previous test. So at this moment, another spectrum test is being conducted, this time with bigger cultivation surface of 70 square meters per spectrum, and now 4 spectra are being tested with 4 different varieties, which represent 4 types of Astromeria. And the spectra being tested are a high red spectrum and the same spectrum with added far red light, and a spectrum which we have called a high blue and white spectrum, where there is less red as above, but more blue and white. And for this spectrum, we also have a version with far red added and one version without far red added. These are the spectra used in the test, and because the test is still ongoing, we have just entered in the second winter. There are no conclusive results to be communicated, but I can tell you a little bit about some of the main observations we have been doing in the past months, like that we have good flower quality with similar stem weight with all the spectra tested. Also that the used spectra do not really seem to affect the generation time, so the time from small shoot to harvest a flower. However, we also see that different varieties react different to the light spectrum in terms of production, and that the addition of far red makes the flowers of 2 varieties remain shorter. And that's a surprising result. We also see that when there is no far red, the stems show a more reddish pigment of the stem. And because we are not finished yet, I hope to be able to tell you more about this at the end of the journey. But at this moment, this journey still continues. And I would like to thank you for your attention so far, and I will be welcoming any questions you have for me at the end of the session. Thanks. See you later. Bye.
Good day, my name is Rauwerdink. I'm the Global Segment Manager for Vegetables and Fruit at Signify Hortilet Solutions. As a global leader in lighting, we very much understand the importance of your choice for the right LED growth light. And that's why we see it as our responsibility to provide you with the right information to take that decision. If we consider the current market situation, the hunt for the perfect grow light is not always an easy one. There are new and unproven suppliers are entering the market. Some are giving dubious data about their product performance, and this is often leading to confusion about what LED grow light to choose. And this choice is an important one because there is a rule of thumb of which we are all aware of, that 1% growth light equals 1% yield. And that's why in the next 10 minutes we will give 3 tips to evaluate the performance of LED grow lights. Number one is to ensure the apple-to-apple comparison. Number two is evaluating both the initial and the overtime performance. And number three is take a closer look at the claimed lifetime of grow lights. Adherence to international standards is the basis for an apple-to-apple comparison. That has to do that international standards, they define what performance criteria must be considered, and they also indicate and describe how to measure or how to predict these criteria. So it's important that suppliers apply international standards, because if they do so, it will make product performance verifiable. Because if you do not trust the claim of a manufacturer, you can ask an independent third party to do the measurements again according to the standards. But applying international standards also makes product data comparable. Because if all the suppliers use the same set of standards, then the outcome of their performance measurement is comparable. It's not only that, it's also that you have to challenge the supplier. Ask him questions, ask him about their testing practices. Do they have a certified laboratory? Is the test equipment that they are using, is that calibrated? Or do they maybe outsource their performance measurement to an independent third party? Ask them about their adherence to international standards, because as we have learned, that's the basis for an apple-to-apple comparison of performance. You should also ask for test data that substantiates the performance claims of the manufacturers. Do they stress the product design by aging their LED growth lights? What do I mean with that? By by letting the LED grow light run at high temperature and high humidity. So we really stress the product and see what happens. Do they have their LED grow lights in some endurance testing? Simply switch it on and see what happens after 10, 20, 30,000 hours. That gives confidence in your product. Do they monitor already realized projects? Meaning, do they monitor the development of the light levels? This is the kind of data that substantiates performance claims. So basically, apple-to-apple comparison is doing your homework and know your supplier. Tip number 2 is about evaluate both the initial and the overtime performance. Typical LED grow light performance is about the amount of photon flux at the start, and that's what we typically call the initial performance, and how this will sustain over the years of operation, and that's what we call the overtime performance. So initial performance, it's about the new growth light. You switch it on and you measure. You measure the photon flux, but you also measure the spectrum. So do I have the right recipe for my crop? You also do a measurement of the light distribution as input for future lighting plans. But you also, for example, measure the power to have an idea on the efficacy of the product. The overtime performance is about the depreciation of the photon flux over time. And it might be that all the LEDs give a little bit less light, or maybe 1 or 2 will fail. But that's what it is about overtime performance. This is a prediction. You have to be aware of that. Overtime performance brings something else, because if you switch on your light for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 36,000 hours will take you 4 years to manage that. And if you go for 50,000 hours, that takes around 6 years. So that brings me to a kind of a lifetime claim dilemma. The expected lifetime of an LED grow light is very long, and the claimed hours cannot be measured before product introduction. So you have to be aware that lifetime claims are predictions rather than measurements. So it makes sense to have a closer look at the claimed lifetime of a product. As a starting point, suppliers take the depreciation of the LEDs they use in their grow lights. And there are 2 international standards, LM80 and TM21, that give guidance here. LM80 explains how to measure the photon flux maintenance over time of LEDs. And TM21 explains how to make a consistent lifetime projection based on LM80 test data. In practice, the LM80 tests typically run for somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 hours. And TM21 allows for a 6 times projection of that data. So lifetime claims normally are somewhere between 36,000 and 60,000 hours. And further projections will exceed the statistical confidence levels, and that means that lifetime claims above 60,000 hours cannot be trusted. So the bottom line in your hunt for the perfect grow light is that standards are the basis for apple-to-apple comparison. Remember that lifetime claims are predictions rather than measurements, so it's important to take a closer look at the claimed lifetime of the LED growth lights. It's also important that you stress your supplier. Ask him about the testing facilities. Do they have a certified laboratory? Is the equipment that they use calibrated? Or do they maybe outsource their performance measurements? It's important that they adhere to international standards, because we learned that that's the basis for an apple-to-apple comparison of performance claims. And the test data, you should ask for test data that substantiates the lifetime claims. It could be that data for stress testing or endurance testing that all supports the claim that manufacturers make. Having said this, maybe the most important tip is be suspicious in case of too good to be true performance claims. Thank you very much for your attention and have fun at the Green Tech.
Wonderful good afternoon. My name is Timo Bongartz and I'm the General Manager of Fluence by OSRAM for the EMEA region. And this morning was a session already regarding artificial lighting, and our moderator, Frans Peter, asked, oh wow, there are so many options out there. And it's not only for Frans Peter that, a lot of growers, they can't see the forest for the trees. So there are so many LED grow lights different with different wattage, different form factors, and different spectra. So this talk is about how to guide a grower through the options and to find the perfect solution for his or her needs. And I want to start with this statement here. There is no one size fits all, because finding the right lighting solution depends on different factors. And I want to mention here only a few. If you grow in a greenhouse, it totally depends on your geographic location. Sweden is different than Spain. And of course, it's also crop and cultivar dependent, what also Nieves told us before, that you have a crop, but the different cultivars can have different lighting needs. Also, energy prices, so the financial aspects of it are very important to find the right lighting solution as well. Are we having a high greenhouse, a low greenhouse? And of course, there are also growers' preferences in regard to lighting. All these need to come together to find the right lighting solution. And I want to guide us through this jungle with a how-to guide for growers to finding a right lighting solution. The first thing is really speak to a horticulture lighting specialist. So to a company which is in the market for a longer time, understanding horticulture, and because this is really important. Then I think every grower needs to explain the application. So is he growing in a greenhouse or in a vertical farm, which crop and cultivar, and also the cultivation method. So for example, growing in a greenhouse, growing cucumbers and growing them in a high wire system. Once this is understood to the lighting expert, the lighting company needs explained back to the grower what is the lighting needs of this cultivar. What is the DLI, so the overall amount of sum of lighting this cultivar likes to have, and also the PPFD level, so the light intensity level. Once this is understood, the next step is again for the lighting expert to make a kind of gap analysis. So what I mean with that is based on the location of the grower's greenhouse, it should be known to the lighting expert what is the natural daylight at this location. And because then the lighting expert can make a gap analysis, so understanding what the crop normally needs, so the target value and what is in the wintertime existing there. And then you can calculate back how much light you actually need in winter to ensure a year-round good quality production of your crop. Then as a step number 5, of course, it also matters what is the business model and the growing goals of the grower. You know, as an example, we said you grow cucumbers and you want to have this amount of kilogram per week to fulfill your needs for the grower organization or for the retailer, and your cucumber should be a maximum weightage of 260 grams. This is, of course, also important to then define the right lighting strategy. And here in step number 6, you see here the lighting expert should make a spectrum recommendation, and this should be based on science. So 6 steps later, we really first time speak about spectrum, because before we should always talk about the right amount of lighting and then what kind of lighting. So first intensity, then quality of lighting. Once in step 7, the lighting expert has all the layouts of the greenhouse and understanding the height of the plant and so on. The lighting expert can make a lighting plan, and this should, you as a grower, you should get this explained, properly explained, and understand how homogeneous the light distribution is in my greenhouse and so on. And then in step number 9, it is time about talking about the product. And here again, 9 steps later, it's the first time really talking about the lighting product, because beforehand, the lighting expert should not really talk about products because he's not sure which product he needs to take from his toolbox to fulfill the lighting needs for this particular greenhouse, for this particular crop. And here at this stage, it's all about talking about the product, talking about the budget, return on investment, the energy needs. And then let's be honest, you see there are a lot of LED grow lights out there. So it seems to be that building an LED grow light is something several companies can do, but how to use an LED grow light, understanding how to change all the other climate conditions to properly grow under LED, that is the real important thing you should get from the lighting company you work with. So horticulture service after the sales is really important. Coming to us as a company, we are a company backed by OSRAM, by the big lighting company, but we as Fluence are working only in the field of horticulture lighting. And we provide solutions for different applications. So if you grow in a vertical farm or a greenhouse, we have solutions for that. And also for all different kind of greenhouse conditions, we have different lighting configurations. And I want to show you in the next picture what I mean with that. This is more or less one of our products. It's called the Viper, but it comes in so many different configurations to make the perfect application fit for your greenhouse. We have, different mounting hardware, where to put the luminaire, under the trellis, next to the trellis, perpendicular to the trellis. We have different spectra we can tap into. We have reflectors to increase the beam angle. So different tools in our toolbox, which we can take to make the perfect solution for your needs. And that is what I meant at the beginning. I don't know what of this you need at the beginning when I talk to a grower. Only down the road, it becomes clear what really to take from the toolbox for your needs. Yes, and we have also different spectra we can tap into, from broad spectrum up to 95.5. We have different solutions in our pocket. We have also solutions for, if you as a grower decide to do on-site propagation up to full production. So for every stage of the growth, we have solutions. But at the end, the only thing what really matters is to provide the right function of light to ensure an enhanced and consistent crop quality and yield. So this is what we have in mind. It doesn't matter what the product name is and all that. At the end, what matters is that you have good quality crops and hopefully a lot of that. What we are doing is based on research, and we do research at different locations. As I'm responsible for Europe, here are 5 research stations we are working with at Rauwerdink University, but also at the research center at Proefstation in Belgium, Munich, and so on. So research really matters, and also proper research. And we are happy that our solutions are based on that and we can give good recommendations. So putting it all together, what are the partnership fields if you work with us? So we're working with Fluence. Yes, we have the LED lighting solutions, but this comes along with horticulture service. So we know how to use the LED lighting. And this is based on research. So we are actually doing the research. We have a broad ecosystem we can tap into. And another aspect, we like to tell the story of our growers. So yeah, put the growers up front and show their success stories. If you are interested, please visit our website. There you see what kind of science we are doing, our case studies and webinars. So there's a lot of content, which is where you see why we are doing what. So I can only recommend to visit that. What are the 2 takeaways of this talk? First, for every grower, do not buy product. Buy know-how. How to use a product is a real thing. Secondly, do not just get the solution, but become part of the solution. So this is the lighting company and the grower. This is a partnership for a couple of years. Also what Kai said, it is a long-time investment. So you need to become part of the solution and understand why something has been selected for you or with you. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer more questions in the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm back in the air again. So thank you, Timo, thank you, Kai, and thank you, Nieves. And I have to admit something, and that in my introduction I said, so the LED is from the 60s. So one could say that LED manufacturing is manufacturing just a commodity. But you guys are coming with such a complex approach. Come on. Where ends technology and where starts commerce? So that as a first step into the dialogue. But thank you for your great presentations you all gave. And I would like to go into the situation, the guidelines Timo gave us. So you're a grower and you're up to invest. With you, Timo, you invest in knowledge, so that's a bit different, difficult to depreciate, by the way. But so I've got a balance sheet issue. So I come with you, and I have. So what kind of conditions do I bring to you, Timo? First question to you. So do I need a crop plan, and how should the crop plan look like?
No, actually, first it's a conversation and getting to know each other, because at the end, what I said at the end of the presentation, you do an investment for a couple of years. So you need to you need to build trust, and and that is why understanding the business of the grower and what what goals he has is of utmost importance. Once this is clear, then you go in greenhouse layouts and so on and design a solution. I think the important thing is that what I said at the beginning is one size does not fit all. There is not the golden bullet. Yeah. It's not existing, and that's why it is a process. And we said it's an expensive process as well in regard to the investment is high in LED, but that's why spending time in it makes totally sense.
Okay, thank you, Timo. Kai, you touched really a good point, and that's so I've got the guides from Timo, and then I've made my short list, and of course your companies are on, and then I have to make my choice, and I have to I get figures from you all, and I have to trust those figures, or do I go to Nieves for some testing, or so there is not Kai a general test procedure. There is not a certification yet. Will it come?
I think we are at an interesting stage with the industry with regard to product quality, because that's basically, I think, where you're referring to.
Yeah.
I think there are many entrants when you into the market. When you visited the Green Tech last year, I think I counted over 50 LED suppliers. So I can imagine as a grower that's really tough. And as I mentioned in my presentation, I think there are a couple of simple points that can help the grower. I would ask myself, how long is the supplier already active in the market? How many years is he in the horti business? How many projects did he already fulfill? Just look at the product. A simple visual inspection can tell you something about the quality, about the design choices that are made. How well is it protected against moist and dust? That's something you can easily see. And challenge the manufacturer. As said, if you bring a product to the market and you make a claim of 50,000 hours, that's 8 years from now. Nobody knows what your product will do in 8 years from now when you bring it to the market. So challenge the manufacturer to come with evidence so that I can trust what he is claiming.
Okay.
I think that's an important message.
Good points, Kai. Thank you. I would like to go to you, Nieves. So you've done a lot of research in Alstroemeria, and one of my questions was, why Alstroemeria, and what's make Alstroemeria such a good research crop? Just a brief answer.
Yeah,
it's
well,
just curiosity of mine.
Yeah, well, one of the keys of the key issues of my presentation is not so much about the light, but what I wanted to show was the process. Yeah. And so when you have a group of very interested growers that are very committed to learn step by step, then it's the choice for a crop is given by the interested growers. But we work with many other crops. It's not only Alstroemeria where we work for. So there are similar projects, similar journeys have been undertaken by other groups of growers.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just wanted to show indeed.
Very nice. So that's thank you. So this
different.
This is just a curiosity of mine.
Together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've learned in another session that the spectra of the light is influencing the plant morphology. And where is taste affected? Is taste affected by the quantity or the spectrum or not? Assuming that I would like to be a tomato grower with candy tomatoes with the best taste.
Can I respond on that?
I will first Nieves and then to you,
Kai.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Well, I am an ornamental crops specialist, so I'm not very good or very well informed about what happens with other crops. But we know that, for instance, the contents of vitamin C are definitely affected by the use of a certain spectrum of light directly on the fruits. So if the contents of vitamins are affected, it's very well possible that also the taste is affected. Yeah. But I think Kai has a better answer to that question.
Okay, Kai, you are in the tomatoes right now. So how can you improve the taste of the tomatoes?
Now we started some research on that actually the previous lighting season together with the Rauwerdink University in Bleiswijk. And what we figured out so far is that taste is mainly a genetic thing. So that determines for 80% if a tomato will be tasteful or not. We have find some first insight that maybe the spectrum will have some influence, but that needs some further testing, some further trials. Yeah. But for sure, the amount of light has a positive impact on the taste of tomatoes. But the main thing is the genetics. So the variety very much depends or determines the taste. Yes.
So it is a myth that tomatoes from the south of Italy are tasting better?
I would say so, yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
But I think, if I may also briefly
Timo?
jump in here, yeah, it's totally cultivar dependent. We see that, and also again, the cultivar and the spectrum have a correlation. So you cannot just give an answer for a tomato. Yeah. And at the end, the taste of a tomato is mostly determined by the Brix value. And this is also a little bit of a stress reaction in the plant. So light intensity and spectrum plays here a major role, how to drive Brix.
Yeah, okay, thanks. A question of Libo New, and that's, does someone has experience with tissue culture? Who may I pass this question? You not, Nieves?
Yes, I can take over this.
Yes, Timo, please.
Yes, we have, especially in the field of medical cannabis, because very often you grow it from clones. Right, but to stabilize the genetics, it's interesting to do it from tissue, and we do lighting solution for that as well. Yes.
Okay. And Kai, what about your experience or your company's experience in tissue culture?
I think the same similar things applies to Signify. We have quite some. We did quite some projects already in China already for many years on specifically on tissue culture. So if you have questions, please take contact with us. No problem.
And then I go to a question of Arun Banerjee. Is there any opportunity for solar-driven or photovoltaic-driven LEDs? And does it make sense in terms of lowering electrical costs through PV? I think we have to split this question because it's the energy supply on one hand and the LED on the other hand. So it's an energy management issue, I assume. Who will give an additional answer to this? Kai?
Yeah, no problem. I think you're right. It's one about energy. So I think photovoltaic will come up because it's towards sustainable energy production. If you should put it in a greenhouse, I'm not completely sure yet because you will probably also take away some daylight. But I know that part is already looking into that. So I'm very curious to see. For us, from an LED perspective, I think then it makes sense maybe to think about direct current type of LED modules, which is not the situation today. So that's an interesting route, which we are exploring slowly. And maybe then we can bring this type of technology together.
I think you're right, Kai. In case you can apply a DC network at the nursery, you would save, what about 15% of energy at least?
Correct, yeah. Something like that.
That would be really an innovation. So perhaps for next time, Green Tech for the Innovation Award.
Thanks.
Question, Nieves, Kai mentioned the 1% is 1%. So I don't ask this question to you, Kai, apologize, but to our researcher. And so normally, you say 1% of light is 1% extra of yield improvement. But I can assume that in some situations or in extreme situations that basic rule is not applicable.
Yeah, well, it depends on the crop. If you and of course on the optimization of all the other cultivation aspects. So not only light, but also humidity needs to be optimized. CO2 needs to be optimized. Temperature needs to be the right one. So when all the parameters are right, then you can talk as a rule of thumb that you have 1% more light is 1% more production. But there are of course variations between cultivars or between crops. So if you look at the Astrum areas back as an example, we see that we had in the OSRAM area of the future, the one I have mentioned and said it's another story, there we have had so far 30% more light, but we have achieved 40 or 50% more production, depending on the variety.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good rule of thumb, but it's not. You shouldn't use it to make projections.
Okay.
Very precise projections.
Yeah.
So it varies around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah?
Nieves.
I fully support that statement.
Yeah, I would say so too in your position, Kai. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't forget that 1% more light you can also achieve if your light conditions, the location where you are is good.
Exactly.
Just you can achieve more than 1% more by cleaning your roof
also,
more often, for instance.
But there is also a limit because the natural process of the photosynthetic process, I've been told that now far below the 10% of the energy is turned into sugars. And I was told that about 20% is the max. So that also, but that's a formula discussion. We do it another time. A question, can we use artificial lighting for sugar beet production? And that's an interesting one. Perhaps I cannot ask Atif Khan what the background of this question is. It could be, is it outdoor? Is it for breeding purposes? Timo, this question is for you, if I may.
Thank you for this question. If it's possible, I would generally say everything is possible to grow. If it commercially makes sense in a greenhouse with artificial intelligence, I'm honestly not sure. So I think it's not a question if it's technically and from a cultivation point of view possible, but is it commercially viable? That is, I think, the driving question here, which I doubt. And so far, or we as a company, do not have any experience with that. So I cannot give a certain answer to it.
Okay. Thank you, Timo. We have to close this FAQ, unfortunately. So thank you for this nice dialogue and give the audience a good insight of all the artificial lighting issues. Thanks, dear presenters, for your presentation. Hope to meet you soon in Amsterdam and have a chat, drink a cup of coffee or a beer in the evening. Dear audience, thank you for watching and thank you for the interaction, and see you soon in Amsterdam or somewhere else in the world. Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure.
Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.